Daughter reveals truth of Don Knotts. Fans furious. Don Knotts was born Jess Donald Knotts on July 21, 1924, and became a fantastic actor and comedian. You may remember him from his roles on The Andy Griffith Show, Mayberry PD, and McHale's Navy. If you're too young to remember those shows, you may remember him as Mr. Furley on Three's Company. If you're too young to remember that, you may remember Don from his roles in Matlock, The Little Troll Prince, Quince, Pleasantville, and guest spots on That 70s Show, Fatherhood, and Robot Chicken. Don has fans from the last 3 generations and has starred in many TV shows and movies. But how much do you know about his life? If you want to learn more about Don and his life, you're in for a treat. Here are many things you may not know about Don Knotts. He had a difficult upbringing. Don was the 4th child of William Jesse Knotts and Elise Knotts. The couple had 3 grown sons when Elise found out she was pregnant for the 4th time, and she was delighted by the news. The family lived on a farm outside Morgantown, West Virginia, and having another mouth to feed with little money was more than William could handle. Don was born in the summer of 1924, and by then, his father had shown signs of alcoholism and schizophrenia and suffered a nervous breakdown. William often terrorized his youngest son and even held him at knife point. Elise knew she had to do something, so she moved the family off the farm and into Morgantown and ran a boarding house. William was bedridden by this time and died of pneumonia when Don was 13. He was a ventriloquist. Don became shy and withdrawn as a defense mechanism due to his father's abuse. Elise encouraged her son to develop a ventriloquist routine to bring him out of his shell, which seemed to work. Don performed his act at local church functions and was a big hit. When he graduated from high school, Don moved to New York to try to make a fortune as a comedian. Sadly, he failed miserably and decided to attend the University of West Virginia. Don didn't get too far in college because he was drafted into the Army during his freshman year. He served in the Army. Like many Americans, Don served in the U.S. Army during World War II, but wasn't on the front lines and was in the Special Services branch. From 1943 to 1946, Don was part of a performance group called Stars and Gripes, and the group performed in the Pacific. Don did his ventriloquist routine with a dummy named Danny Hooch Matador, and the troops loved him. After letting Hooch steal the show for 2 years, Don was tired of the act, and when he was on the ship carrying him and the other troops home, Don threw Hooch over the rail of the vessel, and he swore he heard the dummy calling for help. When Don was honorably discharged from the Army on January 6, 1946, he was a Technician Grade 5, the equivalent to a corporal. Don was given several awards for his service, including World War II Victory Medal, Marksman Badge, and an Honorable Service lapel pin. Back to school and back to work. When Don returned home, he used his GI Bill to finish college at the University of West Virginia and graduated in 1948. After graduating, Don moved to New York again to pursue a career in showbiz. But this time he was more mature and had connections thanks to his time with the Special Services branch of the Army. Don was able to find paying work, and his career took off when he landed the role of Windy Wales on Bobby Benson and the B-Bar B Riders. It was one of the earliest westerns, but the format was in danger of falling out because the audience became more sophisticated. Thanks to Don's character, Windy, the show continued selling cereal until 1955. Don's first television role was on a soap opera. Don's first role on TV was also the only serious role he ever had. When a producer sold his soap opera to CBS, called Search for Tomorrow, he approached Don, telling him he had a role for him on the soap. Don played a neurotic man who wouldn't talk and only spoke to his sister. This was a new experience for Don because he'd never done live TV. He said that when he was in the theater, he was well rehearsed and prepared, but you're never prepared for live TV and need more time for rehearsals. Although Don enjoyed the new experience, he realized that serious roles weren't for him. Don's stand-up comedy album. Don was a hilarious stand-up comedian who recorded his only comedy album in 1961, An Evening with Me. He performed his hilarious weatherman routine, and the fans loved it. Due to the routine's success, he was asked to perform on The Steve Allen Show. Don believed his album showcased his humor and comedic skills, and credited the album for helping to boost his career as a comedian. Don and Andy Griffith. Don and Andy Griffith were great friends. The men met for the first time while filming the movie No Time for Sergeants and realized then that they got along great and loved working together. When the network approached Andy about starring in the Andy Griffith Show, he took steps to ensure that Don Knotts would be his co-star. The men worked together on the series throughout its entire run and remained friends when the series ended and for the rest of their lives. They had an unbreakable bond until Don's death on February 24, 2006 at the age of 81. Don won 3 Emmy Awards in the first 5 seasons of The Andy Griffith Show. The Andy Griffith Show was an instant hit, and fans couldn't get enough of Don's character, Barney Fife, the deputy sheriff. Don won 3 Primetime Emmy Awards in 1961, 1962, and 1963 for Outstanding Performance in a Supporting Role by an Actor and Outstanding Performance in a Supporting Role by an Actor or Actress. Robert Redford, Tim Conway, George C. Scott, and Barbara Hale were all nominated for the awards, and Don beat them all. He went on to win 2 more Emmy Awards for his work on the show in 1966 and 1967. Some actors and actresses never win an Emmy, and Don had 5 from one series. Leaving Andy Griffith. Throughout the series, Andy Griffith often expressed his desire to end the show after the 5th season. He said this to Don multiple times, so while filming the 5th season of the show, Don began to explore a career in film. Don was talking with Universal Pictures when Andy decided he wanted to keep the show going for another 3 seasons, but it was too late and Don's focus was on movies. He decided to leave the show and signed a 5-movie deal with the studio, and fortunately Don's decision didn't affect his friendship with Andy. The movie The Ghost and Mr. Chicken was based on an Andy Griffith episode. Don's first movie after leaving Andy Griffith was The Ghost and Mr. Chicken. The film was based on the Andy Griffith Show episode Haunted House, and Jim Fritzl and Everett Greenbaum wrote the script and were also writers on the Andy Griffith Show. Andy Griffith himself also helped with the script. Don remembered how well Andy could create a story and asked him to come and help put the story together. There was no bad blood between the two when Don left the series, so Andy was more than happy to help. There were some familiar faces from Mayberry in the movie, including Hal Smith, who played Otis in the series, and Dorothy Newman, who played his wife, and Hope Summers, who played Clara Edwards, also starred in the movie. Don played Luther Heggs in the movie, who was a newspaper typesetter and the town idiot, and he spent the night in a haunted house. The film was released in 1966 and was a box office hit. Don hosted a short-lived variety show. Don hosted the Don Knotts Show in the 1970 to 1971 season. He has some very popular guests on the show, including Gary Berghoff, who played Radar on MASH, Florence Henderson, The Carpenters, Chuck Connors, Jill St. John, and most of the Bridges family. Despite the high-powered talent on his show, it was canceled within weeks. The show wasn't canceled because it needed to be more entertaining, but it couldn't compete with other variety shows on the air at the time, such as The Carol Burnett Show, Donnie and Marie, and Sonny and Cher. There was a lot of competition when the show first aired, and it needed to catch up with other variety shows that already had massive followings. Don took over some of Suzanne Summers' lines in Three's Company. Three's Company was one of the highest-rated TV shows in 1980, making Suzanne Summers a household name. Due to the show's success and her character, Chrissy Snow's significant fan base, Suzanne asked for a raise from $30,000 to $150,000 per episode. She often skipped tapings when her request was denied, creating problems for the writers and producers. The writers created 2 different scripts to keep the show going. They wrote scripts that included Chrissy in pink, and the script she wasn't there to tape had Chrissy written in blue. In her absence, many of her lines went to Don, who played the roommate's landlord, Mr. Furley. One example of this was the episode And Justice for Jack, where Don took the absent actress's lines. Both characters weren't very smart, so the lines that worked for Chrissy also worked well for Mr. Furley. Pleasantville. Don landed a role in the 1998 movie Pleasantville, but he wasn't the first actor in line for the part. The movie was about 2 teenage siblings who ended up in a 1950s sitcom, and their modern influence began to change the complacent world significantly. Many well-known actors played in the movie, including Tobey Maguire, Jeff Daniels, Joan Allen, William H. Macy, Reese Witherspoon, and of course Don Knotts as the TV repairman. He played a magical, godlike TV repairman who zaps the two unhappy teens into the 1950s sitcom. In the early drafts, the script intended for Dick Van Dyke to play the repairman who ran Rob's TV repair and was named for his character on The Dick Van Dyke Show, Rob Petrie. In the end, Don landed the role, but the movie didn't do well at the box office. The film's budget was $60 million, earning just $40.8 million. Don was not available for post-production in Pleasantville. There's more to making a movie than playing your part when the camera rolls. When movies are in post-production and things must be re-recorded, it's called looping. Don wasn't available to tape his lines in post, so the producers brought in Craig Shoemaker to fill in. Craig did his best Don Knotts impression, and the audience had no idea it wasn't the actor himself speaking. The Barney Fife statue was destroyed. Don Knotts died on February 24, 2006 of pulmonary and respiratory complications of pneumonia related to lung cancer. When he died, a fan named Tom Hellebrand commissioned a statue of Barney Fife to be erected in Mount Airy, North Carolina, Andy Griffith's hometown and the inspiration for Mayberry. Sadly, work on the statue stopped before it was finished because Paramount CBS owned the rights to the character and scrapped the project because the rights to his likeness belonged to his estate, and Don's widow didn't want the statue to be erected. She said it should have been a statue of Don and not his bumbling TV character. Tom put down $9,000 for the statue and had to take out a second mortgage to repay those who donated. He was willing to donate the unfinished work to Don's family and CBS and said if nobody wanted it, he'd have it melted down. Don finally got his statue, and it was unveiled on July 22, 2016 in his hometown of Morgantown. Don's daughter speaks out. Don's daughter, Karen Knotts, wrote a book about her life with her father called Tied Up in Knots, My Dad and Me, which honors her father who passed away. Karen spent a lot of time on her father's TV and movie sets as a kid and got to see her father act and hated his fans because they associated Don with his characters, even though the actor himself was a fascinating man.